You're listening to episode 240 of Mitolife Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn, and today I'm interviewing Shawn Wells. Shawn is a product formulator and expert in the fields of performance nutrition, longevity, fitness, and supplementation. He's formulated over 500 products and has been involved in the invention patents behind dynamine and teacrine. His latest creation is from Enfinity, and it's called Paraxanthine, which is a metabolite of caffeine, but actually gives you all of the benefits of caffeine with none of the side effects. So paraxanthine has been shown in studies to boost endurance, muscle strength, and cardiovascular health. It also reduces mental errors, increases cognitive flexibility and neuroplasticity, improves mood, increases nitric oxide levels, blood flow, nutrient delivery, waste removal in muscles and brain, and so much more, which we talk about in this show. Shawn shares his healing journey from chronic fatigue syndrome, Hashimoto's, fibromyalgia, and depression. He shares his thoughts on why depression is not just all about serotonin. He answers the question, are supplements necessary? And then we get into talking about caffeine and the genes involved in processing caffeine, what percentage of us are slow metabolizers, and how that group can benefit from switching over from caffeine to paraxanthine. So enjoy the show. Here is Shawn Wells. Shawn Wells, welcome to the show.
Glad to be on, Matt. I'm stoked, actually. I'm ready. I'm energized. I have infinite energy. Call it infinity for this show right now.
We actually are both slugging down paraxanthine. So
yes, I am drinking it and enjoying it. So absolutely, I love it.
It's great. Well, let's start from the beginning before we get into that. I've listened to a bunch of your podcasts, and it's my understanding you've been through the ringer with health challenges. Like you used to have Epstein-Barr and like a lot of mitochondrial dysfunction, like fatigue and stuff like that.
Yeah. Chronic fatigue syndrome, Hashimoto's, fibromyalgia, hypertonic muscles. I mean, basically it's like when you get into that shortfall, it's called insufficient cellular energy states. It's like an acronym known as ICE. You can actually look that up. It's a real thing in research. And in the brain, they call it brain energy gap. It's the same idea, like where there's a shortfall of ATP to basically run the body and all its processes. If we remember, ATP is kind of the energy currency for the body. And so there are many of us that are in a shortfall. If you've studied, I've been following Dr. Thomas Seyfried for 20 plus years. I've been keto for almost 20, 25 years. And cancer as a metabolic disease, we're now seeing basically almost all disease is metabolic in nature. Basically, biological over chronological aging is metabolic in nature. And, it's really coming down to that. And metabolic dysfunction, 87% of Americans. So about 9 out of 10 of us are in this shortfall to some degree. And so it's no surprise that we have a host of autoimmune issues, that we have fatigue, and just, we don't have the immune systems. And of course, add in COVID and, sanitization and all the things that are going on, and us removing ourselves from nature, from other people, from staying in blue light, and, having water that isn't so great, and processed air, and on and on and on and on. All the things, but like that's leading to an extreme lack of resilience and a fragility that we're not hormetically stressing ourselves. We're not under enough eustress. We don't have enough of this stress bucket, if you will. I talk a lot in my book about my book, The Energy Formula, to talk about that stress bucket. allostatic capacity, essentially. And we don't have enough of that. And I never had enough of that. And that also goes from mental. I had depression I was fighting that whole time. And I had, when you see depression, the serotonin syndrome, by the way, is a failed theory in that it is not just serotonin. And there is multiple in 2022 and 2021. There was two different meta-analyses that looked at all these studies, and they said basically it's either useless this is referring to SSRIs, or causing more harm than good. And this is all the SSRI studies, and they talk about the serotonin theory being failed. Where I'm going with this is that if you look at depression, all the neurotransmitters are down. All of them are depressed. And so, like, addressing one isn't enough. But when we also look at it, BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor, is down. And when that's down, you are lacking resilience cognitively, and you stay in loops. And I would stay in loops. Someone would say, I'd play basketball, and someone would be like, "Hey, nice game, Shawn." And I'd be like, "What did he mean by that? Why did he tell me that?" And I'd spend the whole rest of the day thinking about, like, was he being sarcastic? What, did he know something about me? Like, was he talking about my game? Was it like, I'd spend the whole day thinking about, like, because I'd stay in my loops. And that is a lack of cognitive resilience. That's low BDNF. That's depressed neurotransmitters. So all of this is a shortfall of energy, a shortfall of ATP, not enough mitochondrial function, not enough mitochondria. You need both. And this is metabolic dysfunction that leads to glycation, inflammation, oxidation, and brain energy gap, insufficient cellular energy states, disease, faster biological aging over chronological aging, on and on and on. And so this was where I was living for most of my life prior to me getting into biohacking and all the things.
Wow. So what was the first thing that you got into? Was it supplements? Was it healing technology? Was it coffee to try to regain your energy? Like what did you first start looking into?
The first hack for me, I was actually in school for nutrition. I was already very interested in supplementation, but it was more in the sports nutrition realm and like putting on muscle mass. And, I was obsessed with, kind of hypertrophy, playing basketball, trying to put on muscle, all these things, looking good for the girls, all that kind of stuff. But when I got very sick, because I was using ephedrine, because I was using pro-hormones at the time that I thought were safe, and they destroyed my liver. And I used another diet drug. It wasn't a drug. I mean, it is kind of a drug, but it was a supplement sold by this one company called Syntrax. And I'm forgetting the name of it right now. I think it was Triac. It was a thyroid supplement and it trashed my liver. And between like using pro hormones and ephedrine and all these things, I hit like a wall where I could not get out of bed for 6 months. I was sick and I thought I was dead, and I was like ready to kill myself because I didn't know that I could go back to school and finish my master's, all kinds of things. So that's when I started digging into keto. And this is, again, 20 plus years ago, keto, paleo, fasting, immune supplements, like kind of things that were really way ahead of the curve back then. But that got me into the biohacking, if you will, before the term even existed, of trying to figure out how to get myself out of bed and back into the real world. Because if I was going to spend the rest of my life in bed, I was going to end my life.
Wow. Well, I like the explanation of depression not just being serotonin, it's all the neurotransmitters being down, which to me is more of a holistic perspective. It never made sense to me to just focus in on one thing, especially when it comes to the brain, right? It's just this. doesn't
Well,
work
and
like.
it's also that BDNF component. And you can also get into NGF, which is nerve growth factor,
Mm.
and mTOR, which we know about from muscle, but it's also really important to the brain for protein
Mm.
synthesis in the brain. And the brain, when it lacks resilience, it's also BDNF in particular is really critical to the maintenance of neurons, renewing neurons, and creating new neurons, which people used to
Mm.
think, oh, you'll never create new brain cells, but this is possible with BDNF. That's why there is a lot of talk about BDNF right now. How do we increase BDNF protein? How do we get this kind of fountain of youth for our brain? How do we increase this cognitive resilience? Same with, I think when I was younger, like I was saying, supplementation used to be about pushing the limits, biohacking too, right? And now we're talking a lot about resilience and centeredness and flow states and all these things. And obviously, things have shifted quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, where did caffeine fit into your journey with all this? Like,
Always messed me up. Always. It was definitely a come at a cost ingredient. I used to have far more adrenal function when I was younger, but then I destroyed that for sure. And especially when I was combining it with ephedrine and there was the aspirin, like ECA stack with ephedrine, caffeine, aspirin. And then of course, like later on, there was like DMAA and I mean, there was all kinds of things, methylphenephrine, methyl caffeine. There was crazy stuff. Like back when there was pro hormones in particular, it was nuts how much stuff was floating around, including stimulants that were more harsh than drugs, more harsh than using real steroids that had decades and decades of research. Like we were using things that like didn't have as good of effects and had way more side effects, but we didn't know that. I mean, supplement companies were selling them, you think it's safe and um, it was crazy times, but absolutely just I would not be able to get to sleep. And then I was using like melatonin and Benadryl and, Tylenol PM. And it was that kind of thing where it's like uppers and downers. And I would be getting 2 to 4 hours of sleep a night. And it worked for a while. And then again, I hit that wall where like my body just stopped. It just stopped working. And I think a lot of people have this story, especially those of us that have podcasts or, that have influence like you and me, that like it's that wounded healer kind of story, right? Like we all have our kind of hero's journey, but we all have a moment where we were just demolishing our body or something like really bad that we were doing to our body. And we paid the price and then we learned the lesson. And we want to prevent other people from going through that, right? So, I mean, that was definitely the case for me. Caffeine has always been brutal. That's what led me to T-creen, dynamine. And then I think my greatest crowning achievement is paraxanthine called Enfinity. So absolutely, that was a big part of my story.
did you like when I was at the height of my caffeine usage? I was fresh grinding, home roasting, doing 2 espresso shots after a meal, sometimes even midday. Like I was trying to do it right. Did you ever get to the point where you were trying to like biohack it and make it work and it still wasn't working or
No, I wish I could say that. I wish I could say like, I think for like a lot of my biohacking, I really didn't care about like, because I came up, you got to realize like I am 49 years old. When I was coming up, the biohacking was like extremely masculinized, like where it was like, I don't give an F. I'm pushing the limits. Like I'm gonna like drink my urine, inject this like uranium, whatever. And it's like, who cares? It's like it's that kind of thing where it's like I said, I mean, all these pro hormones and stimulants and stuff were chemicals. They were all like they were like extreme crazy things. And I was like there, like, doing my biochem and like, researching all these things. And I was all about the more extreme, the better if it meant results. And I thought like side effects are for, old people and crazy people. So I didn't really think about that stuff at the time. And I wasn't thinking about natural and holistic. And the balance and flow state. That's something that I definitely think about now. And I think over the last 5, 10 years has really shifted. And now you're seeing like those things are massively important to Gen Z. But for my Gen X, like I don't feel like it was, especially in that biohacking realm where it was very masculinized. Now you're seeing like this, yin and yang with like kind of masculine and feminine, again, kind of that more centered, where you're seeing biohacking also mean meditation and grounding and journaling and, plant medicine work and all these things that honestly have been the things that have changed my life by far and away the most. Like it's not like as much as I'm the supplement guy and I can tell you all about those, but honestly, those things have changed my life more. And those are kind of like more on what I'd call like the feminine energy, right? Like kind of that healing, nourishing, nurturing energy, self-care. Whereas biohacking, definitely even the term feels very masculine, like, and, come at a cost and extreme and push the limits. And I think that's why we're kind of hearing more optimization and, like kind of softer terms because it's shifted, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The last like 10 plus years, I've come at it from a mitigation standpoint. Like we just got back from Southern California, which to me is a very harsh environment. That's where I was born and raised for 30 years, but just the air pollution, the noise pollution, just the crime. I mean, there's so much going on down there that is stressful that when I was down there, I was having to really up my supplements and be more strategic to kind of mitigate a lot of the stress from all that, noise, literally. And then coming back up here to Idaho, it's like so peaceful. I mean, I am fully off grid, but it's like, not having airplanes flying over, every hour. It's like all this stuff that really rocks the nervous system. I wanted to ask, have you noticed kind of this anti-supplement kind of agenda? Because that's kind of what I've been trying to educate on the last year or so, because you mentioned grounding. There's also, of course, sunbathing, and I noticed a lot of those practitioners say you don't need supplements. And so I always like to ask, people that are into supplements that question of, how do you usually approach those people when they say that? But my practitioner said I don't need to take any supplements. I can get it all from sunlight. I can, I can transmute elements and biological transmutation. I can make all the vitamins and minerals from photons. There are those people out there.
Yeah, and I don't say anyone's wrong, and I love the idea of someone being able to do a lot of these things, right? But at the same time, the argument is they're supplemental, right? Like, so that means like if you're doing the right things, but even if you're doing the right things, all the right things, if you're eating an organic diet, is it the same organic foods that we would have ate 100 years ago? I have a study actually published in my social media. I have a great Instagram account at Shawn Wells, SHAWN, where I do like a lot of infographics. And I have one that I did, I think it was like 50 years ago, the depletion of like the top 9 vitamins and minerals. It was like, wow, it was crazy like how much it was down. I want to say it was like 20 to 50%. And, this is just across the board. It's just different, like you're saying. I mean, there are all these different pollutants and toxicants. There's literally thousands of chemicals added every year, thousands. And I'm not making that number up. It's like, it is literally thousands. We cannot track all these chemicals and what they're doing to our bodies, to our environment. Um, you know, it's a lot. We do not know the impact. We do not know the impact of how they kind of cross contaminate and interact. Like maybe one thing's safe and we're studying things in a vacuum if we're even studying. We're not studying all those chemicals, but you hope like the generally recognized as safe that some of these things are studied by the FDA, like at least somewhat. But we don't know if, you know, chemical X and chemical Y that are both quote unquote safe, if we add them together, what happens? We don't know. And what happens if you're taking ibuprofen? What happens if you're on an antibiotic? What happens if you have this gene mutation? What happens if you're exposed to this amount of, cosmic radiation on an airplane? We don't know. Like none of this stuff we know. So, that's where it gets dicey and we're kind of flying blind and with that, these supplements can supplement that difference of we're in an environment that is very uncharted. The amount of, again, I don't care how healthy you are breathing, recessed air and you're taking in all this junk light and you're drinking water that isn't great all the time. And you have xenoestrogens and phytoestrogens and metalloestrogens and EMFs and more radiation getting through than ever before cosmically. There's just a million things. And if ultra processed food, all this kind of stuff, all these, again, antibiotics, and then what your food's eating, like, what all these animals are eating in terms of their antibiotics and growth hormones and GMOs and all these things. Like we can't, no matter how healthy you think you are, just sitting in a Tesla, there's like a ton of radiation coming into that Tesla cabin. Like there's so many things. And I don't want to sit here and like, I don't overly dwell on this stuff either because I don't think that's healthy. But you need some interventions that are going to kind of protect you against that gap. You need some insurance essentially because things are different now and very different. I mean, like 50 years ago, different. I'm not talking thousands of years ago, right? If I was to look at just testosterone, look at testosterone in men, like it is precipitously dropping. If you go back to like the basically 100 years ago, we were around like 1,000, 1,200 or something. And now we're at like 250. I hope you guys know, whoever's listening, WNL on your labs means within normal limits. That number is changing all the time. It doesn't mean it's optimal. It just means it's normal. Like what we've normalized isn't so great. And we think it's normal to be inside under, these blue lights and doing all these things that we're doing. And that wasn't normal 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. So like what we are genetically, what we're evolved from, we've run very quickly from. And the rate at which that's changing is dramatic. And not only is it changing exponentially, it's changing like on a quantum level now that we're in this kind of internet AI world. Like everything is changing in a fashion that I can't even comprehend. So do I think that supplements make sense? Long answer, yes, I do. But if you are someone that can be off the grid, if you are someone that is capable of all these things, that does practice, incredible powers of mindfulness and meditation, and awesome, like that is amazing. Like I do believe that anything is possible, and you do not need supplements. It's just like saying, like, do you need plant medicine to have a journey? No, but I don't know many people that can do that. Like, is it possible? Sure. But you need to be like a master of your mind, and in a way that I can't, like, I don't have the capacity to do for the reasons you're talking about. Like, I can't just sit there for 8 hours a day and just, be out in nature and just be in my Zen and, try and get to these higher states of consciousness. Right. So to me, I need supplements, but to someone else, I don't know.
That was a great explanation. And yeah, I'm glad you brought up the testosterone thing because that's a big deal. On social media, there's like glamorization of homesteading and they're making it look like it's just this awesome lifestyle, and it is, but it's a lot harder than social media makes it look, because I've been doing it like 3 years now, and long stretch was by myself, and it was rough with goats and chickens and all this stuff going on. But what I like about it is that it forces people outside, which is kind of a reversal of how we've been living for a long time. Because we used to be, right, farmers and hunters, and now we're mostly office workers working indoors, for the most part. So I like that even in the winter, I have to go out and check on my chickens and grab the eggs, and I still have to go outside to do stuff.
Honestly, it's amazing you do that. It's kind of mind blowing to me. Like someone could like give me like 5 kids right now, and I'd feel less stressed than probably trying to run a farm. That seems crazy to me. like, and I love it. Like, I mean, it's crazy in a great way. I'm like, wow, that's like really, really cool that you're doing that. But it seems overwhelming to me. Like, it seems like a lot of stuff I don't know how to do, and I feel like it would be a disaster. But
You
more
can
power
automate.
to you.
Appreciate it. You can automate a lot of it nowadays, so I'm all about the automation. But yeah, I like that you brought up the synergistic toxicity of things, like being down in San Diego, like the air pollution. Like, I don't know the statistic, but like 30% of the cars down there seem to be electric, maybe 30-40%. Like, I saw a ton of Teslas, but the air pollution was like 50 times worse than up here where we're in diesel country. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm like, is it all the trees? Is it the less people plus more trees? But the ultraviolet light plus the car exhaust are one of those examples of the toxicological synergy that causes accelerated photo aging and damages our skin. So that's why I focus a lot on like vitamin C and vitamin E, just the basics, because I think those are kind of forgotten. People just look at them as temporarily, to supplement them. But
And you look great, man.
appreciate it. Yeah, I go 5 to 6 months without UV and infrared, but wood burning sauna, light devices. It's a different lifestyle. But so jumping into, I don't want to go too long without talking about Paraxanthine, but your story was fascinating, and I think people need to hear all that, the backstory. So getting into, Enfinity and Paraxanthine, or how did that journey begin? And were you playing around with it yourself, like just buying the powder online, or?
No, I had already worked on, I had always looked at caffeine, and what's one of the first questions I get with Paraxanthine is like, no way did you get patents on that? Like, it's a metabolite of caffeine. There's no way. There's no way no one else did it. And I'm like, I hear you. And I did. Sometimes, as an inventor, as a creative, like I'm very much, I've always been a creative force, a visionary, and, I've patented about 25 ingredients, many of which you use in a lot of different supplements. But, I heard this from like an inventor once, is like that the best ideas are ones that are right in front of everyone's face, and the ones that everyone says, well, duh, that's so obvious. Those are the ones that make the biggest change. Those are the biggest shift, because it seems so obvious to everyone once it's done. And it was right there in front of everyone's face the whole time. But no one saw it. And you know what everyone says? Well, that's the way it is. That's the way it is. That's the way it is. That's what everyone says. Well, I don't know. That's the way it is. So, I will encourage anyone who has an inventive mind to tap into questioning that's the way it is, because it doesn't have to be. But for me, like, I did T-crene first, which is theacrine, which is another methylxanthine that had a huge impact. And then methylliberine, which we call dynamine. And these are both distributed by Compound Solutions. I did it with my friends, Dr. Tim Ziegenfuss and Dr. Hector Lopez, who just passed away recently. So those ingredients were amazing in over 700 supplements. I mean, basically, every pre-workout fat burner nootropic on the market has or has had T-creatine or dynamine, and great ingredients. But it had me like going back and looking like the whole time I was working on those of like, wait, there's this one ingredient. I know it's going to be super clean and so much better than everything. And it's literally a metabolite of caffeine. And this is so much more straightforward to talk about, to tell the story. And the more I looked at it, like I've been working on it for about 10 years. And the more I looked at it, I'm like, this is going to be pretty good, I think. So I started talking to my partner in China. He has 100 scientists, million-square-foot facility. And we started working on this. And then it was about, let's see, 5 years ago, I pulled in Dr. Ralph Yeager and Dr. Martin Purpura, who are really good with study design and intellectual property. And I told them all about Paraxanthine, let them try it. And they were like, okay, let's give this a whirl. Let's do all the things. And so we started designing all these studies, filing patents. I mean, we've filed over 50 patents. I mean, condensed some down. I think we're at 23 technically. And then with studies, I think we're at about 14 if I include preclinical and clinical and ongoing. So preclinical is like rodent studies.
Mm-hmm.
But we have about 4 human studies and another 4 human studies underway. So really amazing work that we've done. And we've invested about $3, $4, $5 million in that period of time. But this is an ingredient that it's totally superseded everything that I thought it would. It's crazy. It's not just different or a little cleaner and better. I mean, you know this experience. And basically, I'll go through all the science with people, and then they're like, I don't know. They're questioning me on some science. I'm like, try it, just try it. And it's a game changer to everyone. Everyone I know had bad sleep with caffeine, no matter fast or slow metabolizer, which we can get into. When they start using Paraxanthine, sleep is not only better than caffeine. Here's the crazy thing. We are seeing consistently that sleep is better on Paraxanthine than no Paraxanthine or caffeine. Boom. I mean, that is mind-blowing. Like HRVs are improving on Paraxanthine. People are getting better sleep on Paraxanthine, which is, I can get into why I think that might be happening, but that is like kind of counterintuitive. One of the crazy things that we think is happening is with caffeine and 2 of the metabolites, theobromine and theophylline, they have, in caffeine, it's a trimethylxanthine. You have 1, 3, 7 of the methyl groups at the 1, 3, and 7 position. And when you go to the dimethyl by removing one of the methyl groups, so you get to theophylline, theobromine, or paraxanthine, by removing one of those in the body when you consume caffeine, well, the 3 position, when you remove it, it seems to be like that's what's changing the toxicity. And we see that theophylline, theobromine, caffeine, all of which have that 3-methyl group, are much more toxic. And what we're seeing also, and by the way, paraxanthine does not have that group, but we're seeing also is that paraxanthine is kind of like the active of caffeine. So while I'm saying paraxanthine is the caffeine metabolite, what's maybe said better is that caffeine is the paraxanthine precursor. So paraxanthine is giving you things that caffeine simply does not. When in our studies, we found that nitric oxide via PDE9 inhibition, which is phosphodiesterase, that doesn't happen with caffeine. So we see more nitric oxide, not only systemically to like working muscles, but cognitively. So this is why you're getting more of this kind of brain boost. Uh, Also, in all of our studies, we saw mental errors go down, even though stimulation went up, meaning like adenosine inhibition, wakefulness that's common with caffeine and paraxanthine. Mental errors went down. Mental errors go up with caffeine. And in our e-gaming study, we saw a time effect where the more you stay on paraxanthine, the better it gets. And I think this correlates. We did a preclinical study with mice and, at different levels of age and kind of working memory. It's kind of the swim test where they can't see. It's like the water's colored and there's like a little platform and you drop them in and like the memory is like they remember where the platform is. And like, so you have young mice, middle-aged mice, older mice. When they're on paraxanthine, they found the platform about 60% faster. And this is like at all ages. And what we saw was when paraxanthine was at a kind of higher level, we saw increased BDNF. So again, going back to that brain-derived neurotrophic factor and keeping the brain young, we saw increased nitric oxide. We saw increased glutathione and catalase, so decreased oxidative stress. We saw increased serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine, which is kind of the focus neurotransmitter. And we saw decreased beta amyloid plaque. So all the ways that the brain ages, reduced kind of BDNF, reduced glutathione and catalase, increased oxidative stress, reduced nitric oxide, increased amyloid plaques, decreased dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine. All those ways are how the brain ages. Paraxanthine is protecting or reversing those things. So this would like really put in line with why in this e-gaming study, why we're seeing this time effect where the brain seems to be enhanced with continued use. Really amazing stuff. And then we actually have a fat burning study that we completed that really was set up kind of just like this gold standard caffeine study that's used in all the kind of claims data around caffeine and fat loss and thermogenesis at 200 milligrams. We did the same thing, same study, same design, and we showed that paraxanthine does that as well. So increased energy expenditure, thermogenesis, burning more free fatty acids, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of like really cool data. We have like a training study coming that I'm really excited about. We have a lot on the CYP1A2 gene, which we can talk about coming. We have some HRV stuff coming, as I'm excited about that. So yeah, just a lot of data.
Any lipid peroxidation studies? Because I know that hammers the brain pretty good, the lipid peroxidation.
Yeah, that would be great. We are looking at a combination study with polyphenols. And we do expect to see some of that as well as ages, glycation front as well. So you're talking about like advanced lipid end products, and then there's like advanced glycation end products, and yeah, so we're looking at those as well. So that could be very interesting because like with caffeine, if you look at caffeine anhydrous, it seems to be like more harmful, but like it seems to be negated in studies a lot and maybe have some anti-aging effect, at least in most people, when it's in coffee, because of kind of going back to what you were talking about earlier and all your cool biohacking that you were doing, because of the maybe chlorogenic acid and other polyphenols that are present in the coffee that aren't present in just a pure synthetic form.
Wow. That's pretty exciting. The longer you stay on it, the better it gets. I'd like to read through that one. Yeah, let's dive into the CYP 1A2 stuff and fast or slow metabolizer, because I was aware of that. Yeah, I think I've been drinking coffee for, I don't know, 7, 8 years now. Not a super long time. I knew that aspect, but I didn't know that, you know, the 80% of it is supposed to break down into paraxanthine, and then what is it, 11% theobromine, and then theophylline. There's the breakdowns, but it's mostly
Yeah.
paraxanthine, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Um,
this is all fascinating. And for that reason, almost everyone, when we're talking to them as like supplement company owner or whatever, they're like, well, why do I need to take paraxanthine? So we'll talk about that. But it's a great question, actually. So first off, CYP1A2 is talking about the cytochrome P450 pathway in the liver and metabolizing and the processing that happens there, the methylation that happens there. So um, uh, basically, about one study says around 59% of us are slow metabolizers of caffeine. So this number varies, and if we look at studies um, where you look at the performance, either cognitive or physiologic, meaning like exercise kind of studies, whether we look at either of those studies with caffeine, there's a reason that there's been kind of overall, it seems somewhat equivocal, where we see studies that show increased performance, some studies show nothing. When we actually delineate and where they've gone back and looked at these studies and they were able to, like, a lot of studies, surprisingly, like they keep blood samples, like often frozen, like where you can go back, like, sometimes they're banked where you can go back like 10 years later, especially like, academic programs in particular definitely do this. You can go back and, check this out. So then you can go look at exactly what I'm talking about. And when you go back and look at the subjects and their caffeine metabolizer status, that people that were fast metabolizers were the ones that actually saw performance gains in terms of cognitive or physiological performance. People that were slow metabolizers not only didn't see gains, they actually saw a declination in performance. So that's where, like, this is absolutely fascinating. We think we're all experiencing caffeine the same. We are not. We are not. Half-life of caffeine, anywhere from 1.5 hours to 10.5 hours. This is like, I can't do the math here, 6 or 7 fold difference, right? Between all of us walking around. We are experiencing caffeine very differently. Some of us, oh, I can have caffeine and go straight to bed. There's those people, right? I can have my coffee and, double espresso, go right to sleep. And then you have other people like me that can have like a Diet Coke at lunch or something. And it's like I would be up all night. Like, whoa, like that's a crazy difference. Yeah, I have some friends that are having like 3 bangs a day, and it's like I can't even have like an iced tea or something like at lunchtime. So there's a huge difference. And for those of us that are 10.5 hour half-life, that means 3 days later, caffeine is still in your system. I'm not talking just at night. I'm talking, if you had it on Monday, Wednesday, you're still dealing with caffeine. Like, think about this. So we are not dealing with caffeine the same. This is called bioindividuality, and this is a radical example of it. Huge difference. So there is a massive difference when you look at things like stroke and diabetes and heart attack risk and blood pressure. When you look again at CYP1A2 and slow metabolizers, those things are elevated in slow metabolizers. And in many cases, they're actually decreased in fast metabolizers. So this is why data is very confusing on caffeine. And you'll read studies, and of course, people that love their caffeine or coffee are going to cling to the studies that show, positive benefits, and they're going to ignore the ones that don't, and vice versa. But this is why the data has been very confusing. And if we look at paraxanthine, it's basically experienced the same way by everyone. It has about a 3.5 hour half-life. Whether you're a fast metabolizer or slow metabolizer, you'll experience a very clean, euphoric energy. There is more of like a mood boost and a brain lift and a kind of blood flow lift that is not experienced with caffeine. And you experience that as a fast and slow metabolizer. The huge difference will be if you are a slow metabolizer. you will not be experiencing all these dirty side effects that you were used to experiencing. The brain fog, the anxiety, the sleep disruption, the irritability, all of these kinds of things will be removed. And this is where you hear people that use paraxanthine for like a week and then they go back to their coffee and caffeine and whatever. They realize just how dirty it was and how abusive this relationship was. It truly is a come at a cost kind of thing. Like where like, did you get some energy? Maybe, but it was a very dirty experience. And it definitely took a toll on you physiologically and your HRV, your heart rate variability, and your resilience and your recovery. So this is where we get into that. Now I can get into the idea of what you were talking about if you want me to dive into that with the 80%, and you want me to jump into that?
Yeah, because that's that's what took me the longest to wrap my head around. I think a few weeks ago we were talking, and you said like paraxanthine is what we're after, and so these slow metabolizers. Is it accurate to say that they're slow at breaking down caffeine into paraxanthine, so it's kind of floating around as caffeine in the body?
Exactly. So one is caffeine is actually in plants to be toxic to insects as an insect repellent. Theobromine, one of the dimethylxanthines, the caffeine metabolites, is toxic to cats and dogs, right? It will kill them. And if you give someone theophylline, that's a bronchodilator, a controlled substance, very dirty, lots of side effects, more dirty than ephedrine or something like that, or DMAA. Definitely raises heart rate, blood pressure, etc., like some of the kind of dirtier sides of CNS stimulants. You are avoiding all three of those things and their metabolites, all these three methyl groups. You're avoiding all of that by going straight to paraxanthine, the thing that works, the thing that isn't toxic, the thing that's actually beneficial as well as giving energy. What's cool is, like you're saying, so it does get confusing. You're like, okay, of those dimethylxanthines, those metabolites, 80% is converted or so of caffeine into paraxanthine. It's really about 70% of all the chemicals that could come from caffeine, because there's these methyl uric acids and other things. Mm-hmm. But of those three dimethylxanthines, it's about 80%. So anywhere between 70 to 80%, depending on how you want to define it, is converted into paraxanthine. The problem is the other things it's turning into that have side effects. And by the way, like theophylline is like, I think like 6.5 hour half-life. And you are stuck in caffeine for a long time. Like I just said, it could be 3 days that you're sitting there. And when you're stuck in caffeine, you're drip dropping your way to paraxanthine. Yes, it's 80% or 70%. Yes, it is. But over that same 3 days, it's like, how fast, like what I'm saying, the 10.5 hour half-life is also the same time it takes to convert to paraxanthine, right? So like, that's what I mean. Like that's how long it's taking. So it might take you 3 days to get to that paraxanthine that we're talking about, right? So that's where like it falls short. And you've never really experienced paraxanthine, even though all of us have had paraxanthine in our body hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of times. And it's very, very safe, but you've never experienced it like this. And so it's not just take a little more caffeine and you know what I mean. No, it's a totally different experience. And I mean, say for yourself, like, I mean, tell me, like, I don't need to just, talk like I'm on a, soapbox here and trying to tell the world and, throw my spin on it. I mean, you can tell your story about it.
Yeah, it was actually perfect timing because, being into whatever you want to call it, biohacking, health optimization, whatever, I always try to experiment, as deeply as I can with everything that I try out. And so with drinking espresso, as I said, the quality, all of that, the timing, I did that. The supplement stacks, taking it with Shilajit, trying Hoshu Wu with it, you know, things that are supposed to, holy basil, kind of these calming
Theanine.
agents. I've tried that. Yeah, I usually don't respond that much to theanine. It's interesting, but back to the bio individuality, right? So, uh, yeah, I started to wake up just feeling anxious and like this kind of tightness in my chest from the first second I opened my eyes in the morning. And it's interesting because even though I don't react well to caffeine, sometimes I would have, like a couple of years ago, 2 espresso shots at 8 p.m. and fall right to sleep and sleep through the night. But I had those long-term effects. So I don't know what's going on there in my gene mutations. But switching to Update, I just said, okay, I'll try it. My girlfriend sent me one of your reels, caffeine is dead. here's the sales pitch and here's why. And I was like, whatever, I'll try it. And I tried it. And I think it's been about a month now of not drinking any coffee. I think I've tried it here and there, every couple of weeks, just try a shot of espresso to see the difference. And it's night and day in especially the nervous system feeling, which is to me the most interesting aspect of this. Because I pretty much went cold turkey and didn't get any headaches, didn't get any insomnia. I've never gotten that from coming off of caffeine or coffee. So I'm kind of like an interesting individual because I don't have all the symptoms that,
Yeah.
you were like talking about that a lot of people experience. So maybe I'm somewhere in the middle there between
Yeah,
fast
I
and
mean, I
slow.
think you probably lean more towards fast metabolism. Like, I mean, honestly, like even fast metabolizers that still get the benefits, I know like they still report like this is so much cleaner. There is no
Mm.
one that I've given this to. I think we had a 97% positive feedback when we've given this out. That's wild.
Wow,
That's
that's
like,
great.
yeah, it's a wild number. Like with something like T-crene and dynamine, like it's probably half that, like with stuff like stimulants, you have a lot of bio individuality, a lot of variance in how people respond or what they like and don't like. But this is just, it's so clean. I can't even like say it enough. Like basically everyone experiences it well, just like you're saying. And then I always hear the same thing when they go back to caffeine, it just feels dirty. And for people that are slow metabolizers, it's just like unconscionable to
Mm.
go back to caffeine.
Yeah, I definitely don't have any of that like nervous system stress
Mhm.
feeling that I got with caffeine. One question I had, Shawn, like this morning before this interview, I was kind of meditating on the CYP 1A2 gene, and there are studies showing that there are herbs that inhibit it, and then there are herbs that enhance it, that like
Mm.
induction of CYP 1A2. And one of them I have growing all around the property here is St. John's wort, but echinacea, ginkgo biloba, and then ones that inhibit it include like green tea, um, and what was the other herb? Um, Blanking on it right now. But have you had friends that experimented with that, like trying to amp up that gene with herbs to see if they can does it
Yes.
work like that? Or
Yes. Yes. And there actually is some of that that's responsible for some of the metabolism of paraxanthine as well. It's not as straightforward as caffeine. There's the ADORA, and there's one other one I'm blanking on right now, but there's kind of multiple enzymatic paths that are responsible for paraxanthine. But it's true that it could be interesting doing what you're saying, in particular with polyphenols, to kind of extend the paraxanthine effect if you wanted to do that. Maybe if you were taking higher doses and you kind of wanted to kind of even it out and have it last longer, that would be something that's interesting, for sure. And then on the flip side, you know, I love doing this with chemicals, and I do a lot of work in psychedelics actually. And this is like reminds me of kind of what's called lemon teching with like psilocybin, like where you're activating the psilocybin, and it has like a much kind of like faster, like higher PK, like where it like hits harder and then is gone much faster. right? Like so you might have like a quote unquote hour and a half journey instead of a 6 hour journey if you lemon tech it. Like, and on the flip side, if you like give psilocybin with like some fats like cacao, like it's going to slow it down and kind of ease it. So it's the same idea, like what you're saying. So if you wanted it to maybe hit harder, hit faster, but be out, like let's say it could be very interesting. Here's some use case examples. I'm probably not going to do these things on a supplement level, like, but I like what you're saying just as a nerd. Because like maybe if you wanted to do a pre-workout and like it was 9 o'clock at night, you could do what you're saying where you have like you're increasing the metabolism of paraxanthine so that it kind of gets through real quick. Like maybe you have like an hour and a half experience, right? But we do see in general, I hear this all the time with people that have 7, 8, 9 o'clock workouts with paraxanthine, love it, still get great sleep. This does not happen with caffeinated pre-workouts. Like, I mean, I hear tons of times that these 2, 3, 400 milligram pre-workouts that also have, you know, DMBA, DMAA, ephedrine, and all that. You know, some of these pre-workouts are crazy in some of these specialty shops in particular that have like SARMs and like I saw one the other day that had theophylline in it. I'm like, that's a like
Wow.
literally a DEA drug. I'm like, it's crazy. Like if you go into some of these specialty stores, like they not only had a Delta 8, they had Delta 9, which is like THC, like the real THC. I'm like, damn, these stores are like really pushing the limits. Like, I mean, they're definitely different than a GNC or vitamin shop. But, you know, I hear consistently from people that caffeine, and in particular, obviously, if you have some of these other stimulants, people are not getting sleep after a pre-workout. And I do hear consistently that people are sleeping well with the paraxanthine. So absolutely. One thing I will throw in, this is really important. I usually don't mention this on podcasts and things. We have paraxanthine without caffeine. We recommend you do not stack the two. Obviously, I'm saying caffeine, dirty experience. Why would you do that? But in particular, I think when people have paraxanthine with like coffee or something, it is not a good experience. What I think is actually happening. So if you can imagine what I'm saying with kind of like that pitchfork, right? Of like caffeine's at the top of the handle of the pitchfork, and then there's kind of the three prongs of theophylline, theobromine, and paraxanthine. What I think is happening if you co-administer the two, like within an hour, having caffeine and paraxanthine, you are stacking a pathway where you're essentially telling the body, like, don't send more paraxanthine this way, we have enough. So you're actually preventing the conversion to paraxanthine, and you're potentially pushing things down the theophylline and theobromine paths. So a lot more side effects. It's a much dirtier experience. So even though paraxanthine is a clean experience, I would recommend you do not co-administer the two.
Wow. That's an interesting point. Yeah, not heard you mention that before. It's interesting with the theobromine because when I quit espresso, or temporarily or permanently, who knows,
Mm-hmm.
I was doing chocolate with like company Addictive Wellness had on the show, and it's like herbal infused ashwagandha reishi chocolate and stuff. And I wasn't aware that it also has caffeine in it. I thought cacao just has theobromine in it, but he was saying it has also caffeine. It's just a smaller amount.
Okay, so cacao is crazy. Like crazy, crazy, crazy. If you're to look at like all the things in it, not only does it, yes, it has actually, that's one of the natural occurring places for paraxanthine. And it has caffeine, and it has theobromine, and it has, if you get the fatty version, cacao, like ceremonial cacao, not chocolate, and especially not milk chocolate. That's crap. If you get ceremonial cacao that is full fat, in those fatty acids, you have anandamide, which is the master cannabinoid, like the bliss chemical. PHEA or sorry, PEA is another bliss chemical. So why do like women like go crazy for chocolate, have this like addiction to chocolate, like, oh, it makes me feel so much better, especially like if my mood is down or, what. This is why, like, it is loaded with methylxanthines and bliss chemicals. And it has all these antioxidants and polyphenols, right? Like, so even some of these compounds that should maybe some of them have some side effects, kind of like we were talking about before, these polyphenols change the whole profile dramatically. Polyphenols are like the most potent anti-aging compounds there are. I mean, they're anti-glycation, anti-lipid peroxidation, improve, blood pressure, blood glucose, but also like inhibit NADAs, which is also called CD38, which is breaking down NAD, which is a cofactor that's so important in ATP production and anti-aging. I'm sure everyone listening's heard about NAD and, things like NMN and NR and all that stuff. Like that's like polyphenols are very potent for raising NAD levels and in anti-aging in basically every way. If you look at blue zones and longevity, so places like Sardinia, Costa Rica, Okinawa, Loma Linda, California, all these places like where there's people are living as supercentenarians past 100, high polyphenols. And so cacao has catechins and a number of other polyphenols present, and then all these like bliss chemicals and energy compounds. It is a fascinating blend of chemicals in cacao. So I will say that I honestly do not know any other thing out in nature that's like cacao.
Yeah. I appreciate the polyphenol rant because I actually put full spectrum polyphenols, like whole berry extracts, into my vitamin C that I sell. So appreciate the sales pitch. No, kidding. No, but it's a great blend
like
with ascorbic acid.
absolutely. NADAs, or CD38, definitely worth looking at. But yeah, exactly.
You mentioned higher doses earlier of paraxanthine, and I think I've heard you say in podcasts that sometimes they'll do 2 doses a day, and I assume that's like 200 milligrams each. The LD50 of paraxanthine is much safer than caffeine, right?
Massively, but in our grass application generally recognized as safe, we had to, because it's like new, they basically said it's similar to caffeine, we'll give you the 400 milligrams a day like caffeine. Honestly,
Wow.
the FDA, we talked to the FDA at length. They said if we could take back caffeine, we would. There's just no way to, put Pandora back in the box essentially on that one. Like, 90% of the planet consumes some form of caffeine, although 90% of those people consuming caffeine want to drink less. So there's no way to like walk that back. And even though this is dramatically safer, the amount of side effects and health issues, like especially think about like alcohol and caffeine and all these kinds of things that come up, like Red Bull vodkas and all this kind of stuff that's like, or espresso martini, whatever it is. Like, I mean, you can stack these things and they get dangerous, especially when you think about pre-workouts or caffeine and other drugs. If people are on hypertensives and all this kind of stuff, right? So there are so many things that the FDA wishes they could just kind of take that back, but there is no way to do that. I mean, it is the most important compound to humanity at this point, right? So, so we're at 400 milligrams a day for the grass level. Absolutely. But I get like people that, with Update and Euphoric, which are both, 300 milligram levels for the energy drink and that pre-workouts. Muscle Tech Euphoric is the pre-workout and Update is the energy drink that has 300 milligrams. We have people that are saying like, I do that 2 or 3 times a day. I'm not going to sit here and recommend that because that isn't our grass, but yes, people do it and, love it and still get great sleep. And then if we're going to have a supplement twice a day, like say a fat burner or a nootropic, then we are going to dose it at 200 milligrams. And that's where the majority of our studies are at. And there's unbelievable efficacy data on it as a fat burner, as a nootropic, as all these things in all of our studies at 200 milligrams. Is it going to be like a little bit more experiential at 300? Yes. So, we're doing that twice a day dosing at 200, and some companies, when it's like an energy drink or pre-workout and it's kind of a once a day dosing, they're doing it at 300.
So you mentioned earlier, like the half life is about 3.5 hours. It medically, or as an example, doing it 2 to 3 times a day. Would you split it up by like 3.5 hours for the best effect, or?
Uh, Maybe. I think like, I think it's better maybe at like divided at like five or, six or something, like for people that are telling me. I do it like once, kind of like I like that whole idea of not, jumping my system first thing in the morning. I like to kind of ease into the morning and train my body that way, psychosomatically anchor kind of easing in, and not looking for like a CNS stimulant crutch. Um, I love if like I'm doing a workout, if you can, if this is possible, most people it isn't, but like, 10 a.m., like there's a lot of data that shows you're kind of most productive at those times, whether it's kind of cerebral, kind of creative work or working out. But if not, like lunchtime, if you can get that kind of workout in at lunchtime, I think that's a great time. Like that would be when I love to do something like uh, the paraxanthine, and then I just feel great the rest of the day. It just kind of carries me. Like I don't really feel like a need to kind of like, I know with caffeine, like a lot of people kind of have that like afternoon lull and want to hit it again. And I think a lot of that has to do with one, again, how dirty caffeine is. And then two, having like that metabolic syndrome that we were talking about, where you're eating like a lot of high glycemic carbs and your brain is tired and you're not getting enough sleep because you're having a lot of caffeine and because you're having a lot of sugar. Your brain is actually in a state of insulin resistance when you wake up with 6.5 hours or less of sleep a night. And if you're chronically underslept, you are diabetic in your brain. And that is Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is insulin resistance in the brain. That's metabolic syndrome in the brain. And so you're actually, when you're insulin resistant, I'm saying like you can't take in glucose into the cell as easily and use it for ATP. So this is where keto would be excellent if you are metabolically dysfunctional, insulin resistant. This is where, like, again, like this is going to be the night and day thing. Now, someone who's like lean and athletic and in great shape and doing all the right things like yourself, keto, you may not see a huge difference. Someone who's metabolically dysfunctional, autoimmune, chronic fatigue syndrome, obese, high blood pressure, like they could see a massive difference in terms of the energy that they feel. I'm not just talking weight loss or, things like that. I'm talking about turning the lights on in your brain. You may feel a huge difference because you've been insulin resistant in your brain. And think about when you're tired, first thing in the morning, you want to reach for caffeine, sugar, because of that shortfall, that brain energy gap, that insufficient cellular energy state, right? And so this is where like you kind of fall into this downward spiral of like wanting the caffeine, wanting the sugar, caffeine, sugar, caffeine, sugar. And then you start making like these, poor decisions. You have like that, what's called decision fatigue. It takes energy to make good decisions. So you have decision fatigue. So you just fall back on, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. Like I'll eat healthier tomorrow, I'll work out tomorrow, I'll make better choices tomorrow. And this is because you're underslept. And so this is what's great. Like the paraxanthine thing is kind of the upward spiral where we're seeing, yes, you're having more energy, you're improving brain health, and people are getting better sleep, better HRV, anti-aging. It's like, wow, this is like the upward spiral. It's really excellent to get into that one.
It's pretty exciting. Yeah, I love just searching paraxanthine on PubMed and reading through the studies that are out there on it. That's pretty cool too that you have 4 human studies underway right now.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
more?
Yeah. The
Oh,
training study is a really big one. We're really excited about that. Yeah, and then we have one in Italy that's going on that is with the CYP 182. The one in Brazil that's going on is with HRV. And there's the e-gaming study is coming out by the end of the year too. That's with Super Smash Brothers, and like it's going to be amazing data. Like I've
I used
already seen
I,
some of the early data, and it's like
I
crazy.
I used to play that one, but I think I was eating goldfish and drinking Coca-Cola.
These guys are making crazy money and getting better viewership than like the NBA Finals, the World Series, the Wimbledon. I mean, it's crazy like what's happening in e-gaming right now. So yeah.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of supplement companies or ingredient companies are doing studies that are catered to e-gamers. I've been noticing that trend over the years.
Well,
It's
I
really
mean, not
interesting.
only are there a lot of e-gamers, but like that data like applies to all of us with like a resistance to cognitive fatigue or anytime we need to be very focused, you need to have hand-eye coordination. I mean, this is actually hard work in terms of your brain. Your brain expends more calories than anything else in your body. So this is doing a lot of work when you're playing like these first person shooters or things that are cognitively complex and there's hand eye coordination taking place. Like you need to have razor sharp vision. You need to have very fast response times. You need to have resilience, right? Like if you get shot, like and your kill death ratio is all whatever it is, it's just like real sports where it's like how do you bounce back, like the quarterback that just got sacked, and like does he bounce back, like what does that look like, especially when you're 2, 3, 4 hours in, what does that look like? And trust me, like this isn't just these guys in the mom's basement kind of thing. Like these are guys that are now making millions of dollars and have sponsors and are traveling and are working out and and it's like, and the pressure is real. Like honestly, like the pressure on athletes now, like in general, is not comparable to no matter how nostalgic you get, is not comparable to anything like in generations past. The pressure is intense. The global viewership is massive and the dollars are massive. And yes, it must be nice to make $50 million, but that pressure is real with all these sponsors and the way you can get canceled and the way every bit of your life is like under a microscope, right? Like, so these guys are under real pressure. And, that's where performance isn't just on the court in the gym, it's like all day long. They need to perform all day, every day.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of them are looking now to blue blockers and red
Yeah.
light therapy and all this stuff. And
Totally. Totally.
uh,
Yeah. They're definitely biohacked. I'm sure it wouldn't be uncommon to have a biohacker e-gamer like reaching out to you saying like, hey, how do I, enhance my performance? Like, and yeah, that then the name of the game right now with supplements is definitely e-gaming. Those supplements are exploding right now. Like what used to be pre-workout, there's a lot of e-gaming supplements like that.
oh yeah. Uh, Had a random question. I got my self decode DNA stuff
Hmm.
back this morning, and it was the that my haplotype. It said I'm the H536, and I asked my buddy David. He's really big into the circadian health stuff, and he said, "Oh, you're well adapted to a cold climate. That explains why you're in North Idaho."
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. So you probably have a better brown adipose tissue number and activation. That's kind of the holy grail of big pharma right now is how to get more brown adipose tissue cells and how to activate them more, and then how to what's called beige white adipose tissue. And so this is where one of the supplements I've worked on, Grains of Paradise, is actually really potent at increasing brown adipose tissue activation and number. Actually, at 40 milligrams, we showed 100 calories burned. And then we showed it was crazy at 80 at 80 milligrams, I believe. This is like a pilot study we just did. No, it might have been 160. 160. We showed that with three people, so this is just pilot level, not huge significance, working out versus not working out. When they worked out, it was an extra 250 calories burned. That's like being on a treadmill for an hour. So this is like the reason why, like, I think, that difference why some people are like lean no matter what, and some people aren't. One of the things you can do is these kind of thermogenic spices like cayenne, ginger, but in particular, this grains of paradise. And then also do cold plunges or shiver walks or sleep, without the sheet, or use a chili pad, or, things like that are all great to keep yourself cool and do cold exposure that will increase your brown adipose tissue levels. You only have about 7 ounces on your body. So it's basically 99% of your fat is white adipose tissue. This is kind of the fat burning fat. So this is definitely the one you want.
Is that the L-Baiba stuff?
So L-Baiba is another ingredient I've worked on. And that one actually increases brown adipose tissue activation as well. This is crazy. So what it is an exercise mimetic. So it literally mimics exercise. When you're intensely exercising, you break down that BCA muscle pool, which is why, like, some people say, like, have BCAs intra-workout or peri-workout. That valine is one of those BCAAs, and it releases what's called a myokine. It converts into beta, and L-beta in particular. There's D-beta and L-beta. L-beta is the exercise mimetic, the mimic for exercise, where it sends the signal that the body is intensely exercising. So basically everything that's associated with intense exercise: increased VO2 max, increased muscle mass, decreased fat mass, improved muscle innervation, increased BDNF, improved ketone utilization, glycogen storage, all this kind of stuff, bone mineral density. It's all improved when levels of BABA are higher. And we've shown that when you orally administer L-BABA, that you increase BABA levels endogenously in the body, and you then have this mimicking of exercise. Now, we can't say per the FDA that it mimics exercise, that, like, this is exercise in a bottle. We can say that it augments the signal. It enhances the effect of you doing, because FDA wants you to always say that with healthy diet and exercise. So it's augmenting the workouts that you're already doing. I'll say that. So basically getting more out of every rep and every step. Like, maybe that 8 reps is more like 12 reps to your body, or that 8 weeks is more like 12 weeks to your body, or something like that. So it's a really cool one to add as well, for sure.
That's awesome. Let's jump into some of the questions that listeners sent in, if you're cool
All
with
right,
that.
let's do it.
What are paraxanthine's effects on the adrenals compared to caffeine?
Paraxanthine's effects on the adrenals compared to caffeine. It is a CNS stimulant, a central nervous system stimulant. It is inhibiting adenosine, which is increasing wakefulness. And it is having impact on these catecholamines. So, cortisol, epinephrine, dopamine, as any stimulant would. But adrenal fatigue wise, I mean, you can tell me, like, and everyone that I know and talk to, you're not seeing that kind of impact on, I think in particular, cortisol and epinephrine. It is actually more impactful on dopamine, which is why I think you kind of get more of that kind of swagger or euphoric effect, confidence effect, and certainly like productivity effect that's associated with dopamine. But you don't get I would say, the adrenal impact in a negative way. There's some stimulation of those, but it's certainly not as much of the other catecholamines. Again, I think that's why we'd say it's a clean experience, is like you're not feeling as much of those, in particular, like kind of that epinephrine, which is also known as adrenaline.
Mm-hmm. Does it cause dependency like caffeine?
No, so we've actually looked at this. There's the idea of habituation and adaptation. So habituation is that physiologic dependency that you're talking about. There are studies with caffeine where with I can think of one with rodents where by the third day they needed that level of caffeine to get to baseline. So not only is there habituation where like you're kind of physiologically dependent upon it, again, to like the same place that everyone wakes up, you now need caffeine to get to
Mhm.
that place. This is why people are like zombies at Starbucks in the morning, right? Like they need it to just get to baseline. Like I can't get going without my coffee in the morning, that kind of thing. It's real. But adaptation means like it actually has kind of diminishing returns. There's less efficacy over time. And the side effects are actually increasing kind of with time. So we've shown that both of those things are not the case with paraxanthine.
Wow, that's awesome. Um, Kind of a random one experience with saffron as a supplement
Yeah.
for focus and deep
Yep.
work.
Yeah. So saffron, in particular, the saffronels, like when it's standardized for saffronel, I think Satya Real is like actually one of the branded ones. There's several. If you go to Nootropics Depot, you can go way down the rabbit hole on a lot of these things. But look for saffronels, which is NALS is what it could be standardized to, and you want that. And it's been shown to enhance serotonin in particular, which again, I think acutely can have some benefit, but when you're chronically elevating that, especially kind of like as an SSRI path where you're inhibiting the uptake, you actually, I think, get diminishing effects over time. So I'm not really sure of the mechanism, but I do know it affects serotonin. So it is worth something exploring for sure.
Mm, awesome. I think that's all the good questions, and I think you answered a lot during the show. That was jam packed. Thanks, Shawn. This was really fun.
Yeah, awesome. Yes, I loved it. I enjoyed it. I talked a bunch, but
You're supposed to. You're the guest. So
okay, well, cool. Well, I mean, if anyone listens to this and they're, interested in trying paraxanthine or any of these products, or they have tried it and want to give me feedback, I would love to hear about it. Message me, certainly follow me at Shawn Wells, ShawnWellS on Instagram or YouTube, all those things. And I answer my DMs. So I'd love to hear from anyone on that.
awesome. Yeah.
And then I have my book, The Energy Formula. Check that out too. It's a biohacking book.
Great.
Really good stuff. It was a bestseller on Forbes and USA Today. You go to energyformula.com.
And updates on Amazon as well as drinkupdate.com, right?
Yep, yep, it is. Yep, and if you want to try like the pre-workout, like Muscle Tech has Euphoric, which is spelled with an IQ, and then there's a thermogenic product they have called Burn IQ. All of those are on the respective sites or on Amazon, as you said.
Right on. Well, thanks, Shawn. Stick around as we close out the show. Well, that wraps up today's show. I think the most mind-blowing part for me was where he said it might take up to 3 days to get to paraxanthine from caffeine, and that about 60% of us, being slow metabolizers with that CYP1A2 gene mutation, don't even get those benefits that we're looking to get from caffeine. So I'm really happy to have found this compound and for Shawn to have introduced it to the world. It's a really interesting stimulant and to me a lot gentler than caffeine. I've been off of coffee for a little over 3 months now and just doing this experiment of exclusively drinking this paraxanthine beverage. And it's been really night and day in how I feel. Even if I double up and have two in a day, which I usually just prefer to keep it to one, and still consuming it in the same way that I would coffee. I like that Shawn made the point to have that natural cortisol rise in the morning without any help of a substance. And that's what I do every day. I'll wait until after breakfast and then maybe an hour or two or even 3 or 4 before I consume paraxanthine. And I'm completely open to cracking the code on why I don't feel good on coffee long term. I think short term, I do okay on it, but it's really consuming it every day for months or years straight where it seems to catch up with me. And I think everyone would have their assumption of why that is. Maybe I'm missing reishi in my life, or hoshu wu, or I'm not consuming enough protein or carbs to support my nervous system function, or whatever it is. I'm continually experimenting with everything. And if I happen to someday stumble upon some perfect stack that works for me and stabilize my nervous system, even with daily espresso consumption, then I'll go back to it because it's enjoyable. And I encourage you to approach this with the same level of experimentation. If you're not feeling good from caffeine and maybe you're getting the jitters or the anxiety, then just take a break and switch over to paraxanthine and see if you feel a difference. I know for me, it's absolutely night and day. And the whole topic of stimulants is fascinating to me, whether it's tobacco or coffee and caffeine. I've heard Shawn say in other interviews that it's so deeply embedded in our culture, and it's been such a integral part in the development of civilization and its advancement. Stimulants are just built in to the system that we've created. And some people can go without them and just drink their non-stimulant herbal teas, and I think that's great. But for me, I enjoy the creative boost, the energy boost. If I feel overwhelmed and have so many things to do, consuming paraxanthine really helps me to be more productive and get a lot more done than I would otherwise. I am an affiliate for Update. So if you want to try it out, you can use the discount code Blackburn and you save a little bit. Try it out, see if you feel a difference, really tune in, be consistent with consuming it, and then take a break and maybe even try caffeine and see if you notice a difference in your nervous system. And again, as Shawn mentioned, you can head over to energyformula.com to check out his book. My website is matt-blackburn.com. You could read about my CLF protocol, see all of my recommended products. Currently, the Update drink is up there on the front page under featured products. And I have all of the other ones that I use, and most of them have discount codes. You'll notice the first product is the 7-stage drinking water filter from Mitolife. And that's my brand. I have grounding sheets, a water filter, and then various really effective, clean supplements. Just wanted to give an update on the water filtration unit. This has been almost a year in the making now. And recently we had a snag with the packaging where the company wasn't willing to make it super strong to withstand delivery drivers, like UPS drivers, throwing it around like a football, as they often do. So we decided to take the hit and take 2 to 3 more weeks to get you guys packaging for that product that will withstand the rigors of shipping, especially with something as sensitive as water filters. I've received a bunch over the years that arrive broken and the plastic is just cracked and there's absolutely nothing you could do. You have to return the whole unit. So we are really thinking through every little aspect of this to make it the best experience possible. As I've said before, this product is not private labeled from some water show like a lot of companies do. This was completely custom from the ground up, from the metal enclosure to the brackets everything is custom and of the highest quality. There's just simply nothing like it on the market. So keep your eyes out for the 7-stage water solution that will definitely be out by the end of September. And it's possible that we'll actually release a small run of about 10 units a little earlier. So make sure you're on the email list, you're watching the social media, and you'll be updated there. Also, check out the Mitolife Academy that's on YouTube. The bottom of the Mitolife site, you can click the link there and you'll go directly to it. And that's where you get 2 private videos every month and a live Q&A, usually the last day of every month. Last month, I did one on 3 myths about melatonin that was really fun to make because I see those 3 myths thrown around so often on social media that it's going to shut down your own endogenous production if you supplement it, and all of these erroneous ideas that aren't based on clinical studies. So check that out. That's Mitolife Academy. New show every Friday. I'll see you guys next week. Stay supercharged.